Hey everyone, it's Friday. That means it's time to deploy. I'm your host, John Bristow, and normally on my right over here would be Jim Pelletier, but unfortunately, Jim is not with us today, so you'll just have me for today. Jim's away on leave, so I'm hoping he's having a relaxing time. Anyways, we'll get on with the show. For those of you who are just joining us, this is a show where we take a look at the latest tech trends and news surrounding Octopus, etc., and kind of give our take on it, our ignorant sometimes take on it, but let's go ahead and get into some of the news of the week. So first and foremost, obviously, I keep coming back to this, but I'm absolutely in love with our website. We're adding more and more stuff to it all the time, so feel free to check it out. It's at octopus.com. One of the things that has recently occurred relative to Octopus is we've had a lot of really great success with getting the word out around continuous deployments. A fellow Octopus employee of ours, Steve Fenton, was recently on a TechStrong TV panel where he talked about the state of CD report. This is a report that we've talked about before. It comes out through Slashdata and is published through the Continuous Delivery Foundation, and you'll find a link for it here. And so this was a panel discussion that Steve and others were a part of, discussing the report's findings. You may also remember that I actually had an interview with Steve. That's up on our YouTube channel, where we talked a little bit about the report itself. Incidentally, we found that teams that had more tools, not less, but more tools in their arsenal of CI/CD tooling were typically more successful in deploying and getting successful deployments out. They had better DORA metrics, they had faster velocity, etc. So I'm sure they talked about it on this. But Steve and I definitely talked about this as well. So definitely worth checking out if you're at all curious. That's available up on the CD Foundation website, which is at cd.foundation. Our roadmap, if you haven't seen this, bookmark it, make it your homepage. So it's a great place to go if you're finding out all kinds of information around what's happening relative to Octopus. So you may notice that we've got some new items listed here if you haven't been here recently. So these are some of our planned features that are coming up. So we're looking at OIDC support in the context of, flowing identity, a GitHub app, for example. We're doing lots of really cool features around GitHub, for example. And incidentally, Jim has just come and said hello. See you in a couple weeks. Jim, you should be on vacation. Go have a beer or something. But thanks for checking in. So you can see our roadmap here. We've got a lot of stuff that's coming. Timeout for new steps, for example. Timeout for steps, which is another feature to complement step retries, etc. These and other capabilities available up on our roadmap. So go ahead and check those out if you have the time to do so. If you're at all curious, you can also submit your ideas. There's a big blue button up here at the top right corner. You can also see our list of features that we've released, as well as those that are also under consideration. If you see a feature here that you think is really important, you can actually go into one of them and actually see, hey, that's really important, and give us your vote. So that's really helpful for us. So please feel free to take part in that discussion. So moving on to some of the articles and blog posts that were written during the last week. This is a blog post from Ellen talking about our script editor. So for those who don't know, when you define a deployment process in Octopus, you'll define, in some cases, inline script. And for a long time, we've had a built-in editor experience. This is basically something that allows you to write scripts for a variety of tools, and we support a variety of languages inside of that. And for a while, it's kind of looked a little crufty, like it needed a little bit of a touch-up. So Ellen, being the designer that she is, talked a little bit about some of the things that we've gone and done to make it a better experience. So this is what it looked like before. For folks who are familiar with this, this is basically the variety of languages that we support out of the box. We have our binding syntax here for variables as well, and you can go full screen, and it has other commands that are supported for the keyboard. But now what we've done is we've given it a little bit of a touch up here, and we've added some commands along the way. So we've kind of consolidated some of those languages in a drop-down list. We've added features like copy to clipboard, etc., insert variable, and others. So Ellen talks a little bit about these features. I like when we see kind of the motivations behind why we made these changes in a blog post like this. So this not only tells you the what, but it also tells you the why and the how in regards to some of the changes that were made. And so what we're trying to do is make it a little bit easier based on the shadowing that we've done with a variety of customers around how people are using these features and trying to make a better experience going forward. So you can see how we're consolidating features there. Again, this is a blog post that we've written. It's available up there. It's entitled our uplift for Octopus script editor. So go ahead and check that out and read if you have a chance to do so. Awesome stuff. This is the Terraform registry. Now, for those who don't know, when you go to use Terraform, you have a lot of different types of providers available at your disposal. A provider is a way in which you can talk to a variety of disparate systems or remote systems, like, for example, Azure or AWS or Octopus. And with these providers, you can communicate easily via HCL as the sort of lingua franca for describing state. For a long time, we've had a provider available up on what's called the Terraform registry. The registry is basically a collection of various providers that have been written along with other things, but mainly providers. And they've been there for a variety of different vendors, and they're typically maintained by the community, etc. The reason why I'm mentioning all of this is because we recently just crossed the 1 million download mark. So hooray. This is quite an achievement, I think. If you had told me when I published this thing to the registry that we would pass 1 million, I wouldn't have believed you. When we first published this thing, for the longest time, it said downloads this week, and it said less than 100 for like ever. And I was like, all right, I guess no one's using this thing. But, you know, slowly and surely over time, as we improved it, it got more and more downloaded. And so I'm super happy and proud of this achievement. This is nowhere near the number of downloads that you see with other providers. So to provide some context, like the most popular providers that are on the registry include AWS. They have like billions and billions of downloads, but that's AWS. But for us, I think this is a pretty good achievement, I would say. So 1 million with the pinky out downloads of the Octopus Deploy Terraform provider. So I'm pretty happy about that. So feel free to check that out. And incidentally, we've also got some updates for other tools. This isn't a recent update, but we've been slowly but surely adding various features and solving issues relative to our tooling, namely the CLI, the new CLI. So for those who don't know, we actually have a CLI that's based on Go. This was released last year, and it's quite a nice experience if you're at all inclined to use it. The CLI that we built here based on Go has a feature called interactive mode, which allows you to basically answer questions, and it will spit out a result for you based on your answers. It will also generate for you an automated context command. You'll find it up on GitHub, and I think it's a great way to actually drive Octopus from, you know, creating releases to iterating projects, etc. The reason why I mention all this is because, as I said before, we're constantly touching up our tools, and the CLI is no exception. So there have been some recent changes that have been made and shipped, and so if you feel so, you can go check those out, and that's up on GitHub. So that's github.com/octopusdeploy/CLI. Awesome. This is a LinkedIn post that was written by Adam. He's a member of our team at Octopus, and I wanted to take a moment here and react to it. This is an article that I thought was quite good, and would like to just take a moment here and talk a little bit about what Adam proposes here as far as CI is not CD. And he's got this quoted. So CI is not CD. That is true. So CI and CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment, depending on your definitions. So all CI platforms, CI platforms are things like GitHub or GitLab or TeamCity or Azure DevOps. These are build environments that generate packages, and they typically run unit tests. That's why they're called CI platforms. And so CI is continually running workloads against your code. Like, you know, GitHub Actions are constantly running against code. They're updating packages, they're issuing builds, etc. So all CI platforms, platforms are missing features that CD platforms provide. CI is driven by source code. That is true. But CD is driven by artifacts and environments. That is also true. So to give some context here, what is an artifact? An artifact's like a binary that you might generate as part of a build, or something like related to part of your deployment, like YAML files, etc. These and other types of artifacts you'll use constantly. So if you're deploying to Kubernetes, you'll utilize YAML to describe the configuration, for example. If you're pushing out binaries, if you create DLLs and you're shipping those as part of an ASP.NET application, you'll use ASP.NET DLLs as part of your artifacts for delivery. In addition to that, there are concepts within a CD space known as environments. These are typically what you would think of as dev, test, prod. So dev, test, prod is the sort of three-tuple that most people refer to. But environments are basically those ways in which you will define these sort of targets for deployment. And so typically, if you're defining these things and you care about these at the CI level, you're probably doing CI wrong. CI should be very focused. And that's why you consider these things as a pipeline. It goes from CI, then to CD, then onward to monitoring, logging. And then that's why there's a Mobius strip for defining the DevOps symbol, because it then tails back on itself. But really, that's a unidirectional model. And you shouldn't really, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have this in that space, but whatever. Using CI to replace CD means enforcing certain coding practices. That is also true. So deploying from staging to production should not involve code changes, but should involve pushing the same artifact from staging to production. CD tools make this easy, but CD tools require code changes to trigger in most cases. So a typical example, let's say GitHub, and you have to issue a commit to your source tree in order for something to happen. Now, that's not necessarily always the case. You can certainly trigger actions without code changes, but typically that's what you'll do in a CI context. What I mean by that is you can issue like a workflow dispatch through GitHub, and that's very easy to do. So that doesn't require a code change, but typically it does. CD tools have a much higher visibility into the environments. That is also true. That's typically where you'll define those things. You'll define things like life cycles and channels, etc. CD tools are focused on showing you the results of pipelines, and CD tools can create dashboards showing you which environments are running which features. That is also true. And so this is why CI is not CD, getting back to the original statement, the thesis of this blog post, if you will. Using a CD tool, especially one such as Octopus that includes a concept of templating, which is basically like things like step templates, using variables, etc., allows deployment to be decoupled from code. That's so vital and so important and awesome. Like, why would you want deployment coupled with code? It doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of source code. Now, obviously, there are features that you want that, like configuration as code, but that's an entirely different animal. Projects can all reuse the same deployment code regardless of their languages. When using CI for CD, you have to create more complex pipelines to work around the shortcomings of CI. Tools that are built explicitly for CD tend to be simpler to understand and use for deployments. And yeah, this was something that, was posted here by Adam. And this was basically not a quote, but a part of something that was shared by a customer. And we totally agree. And so I think this is an awesome way to consider the differences between CI and CD if you're all confused. And that's something that Adam posted up on his LinkedIn. So that's pretty awesome. Thanks, Adam. Anyways, that's a summary of some of the things that happened on the Octopus side. And now I'd like to take a moment and talk a little bit about some of the industry trends that we saw over the last week. So for those on the .NET side, we now have .NET 8 Preview 6. So Justin here wrote a pretty lengthy blog post about all the changes that have gone into Preview 6. They've developed this different cadence now for shipping for .NET. We are marching towards the release, which I think is scheduled for November. The roadmap is publicly available. It's up on their GitHub, and you can check it out there. But .NET 8 release, or Preview 6, the sixth release of their preview line, is bringing a lot of new capabilities to bear, which is awesome. We have capabilities in ASP.NET Core, in C#12, in MAUI, and we're adding new capabilities to tooling. And that's typically what you see with any framework, is that once the tool, the framework becomes a little bit more mature and features start to get locked in, that's when the tooling starts to catch up. You start adding capabilities around things like VS Code or VS Proper, etc. So to give an example here, if we just jump into ASP.NET Core, lots of updates to Blazor, lots of updates to features regarding metrics. We talked about some of these in previous shows, like, for example, Redis attribute-based output caching, kernel-based response buffering for hp.sys, which is the kernel level driver for HP and HPS inside of Windows. And so lots of changes there, which is great. You can find the summary there. There's changes coming down the pipe for C#. Obviously, version 12. Anders Heilberg and friends are busily implementing changes to that. One of the changes, or one of the big sort of changes, which is a bit of an experimental feature, is a thing called interceptors. So if you scroll at the bottom of Kathleen's blog post here, you'll notice that she highlights this section here called interceptors. Interceptors are really interesting. They kind of mimic a little bit what you see with source generation. And so if you're doing anything around ahead of time compilation or AOT, what interceptors allow you to do is basically allow you to capture and inject custom code paths. So you can actually change or route where method calls go when executing your source code. And this is only an experimental feature. So you have to opt into this via your configuration file, but it allows you to do remapping. It kind of reminds me of sort of like, platform invocation or p-invoke, where you could actually target sort of binding redirects, etc. But it's a way of doing this at the method level, which I think is pretty cool. And so these and other changes are definitely interesting. And if you're at all interested, you could read this blog post. Probably the most interesting one that is probably most customer facing are the tooling support around Maui. So Maui is Microsoft's .NET solution for huge multi-platform targeting. You can build iOS apps, you can build all kinds of apps for Mac, Windows, Linux, etc. And they're now adding a extension for VS Code for you to build these types of apps within VS Code, which I think is pretty cool. So the .NET Maui extension is now available. You can download it as part of the marketplace. It is part of the sort of solution regarding C# Dev Kit, which we've also talked about. But what it provides is things like code editing based on Roslyn. You get a really nice design time experience around your code, a new project level startup capability. So getting started with Maui gives you this nice experience, etc. So these and other capabilities are there. And shout out to the team that built it. I mean, when you consider how many platforms Maui allows you to target, then you consider the fact that you can actually debug against those targets in an environment that is also multi-platform, meaning VS Code can run Windows, Mac, Linux. The matrix just blows out, right? So you've got all these different permutations of how you can debug to remote targets. That's pretty cool. Like, that's insanely cool, actually. So this paragraph, as I've noted to friends, is not detailed enough and is definitely deserving of high praise. The team that built out debugging capabilities for all of these targets really does deserve a tip of the cap, because this is not an easy feat by any stretch of the imagination. So anyways, .NET Maui, the extension now available for VS Code, which is awesome, and definitely looking forward to other features. So just to remind you, .NET 8, this is the next major version of .NET. I believe we're definitely on pace to seeing this shipped in November. So the previews will allow you to keep up the speed. So make sure to check out those blog posts as they ship. This is an article announcing a feature from the folks over at Logs. This is Kubernetes 360. Logs is a solution provider for providing telemetry and monitoring support for a variety of stacks, including Kubernetes. And they basically added this capability around Kubernetes, Kubernetes 360. Kubernetes is getting a lot of solutions around monitoring because it is a beast. It needs a lot of things that you want to monitor, for example. And so Kubernetes 360 is the sort of product name that Logs has given for the set of enhancements that have been added to their stack, allowing you to track a variety of metrics. So you can see in the metrics tab some of the things that they're allowing you to track. So you can see a breakdown of pods, CPU usage, memory usage, etc., based on pods, and then a variety of logs that are emitted as part of the runtime, etc. So these and other capabilities are coming to Logs, and it will allow you to get better telemetry and visibility into your Kubernetes deployments, which I think is cool. That's very, very cool. So this is, again, a blog from logs.io, so feel free to check that out. And then our friends over at JFrog have announced, if you're at all curious about SBOMs or software bill of materials, there is a new feature available from JFrog, JFrog Curation. This is a feature that they recently announced up on their blog, and they talk about this in terms of being able to have security relative to supply chain. So what this means is, where are your dependencies coming from? Where are your libraries and artifacts coming from, and have they been validated, etc.? And this is hugely important relative to solutions regarding open source software, obviously, and exploits regarding things like that have occurred in the past. Supply chain is always a concern relative to these things. And so with regards to that, JFrog has announced JFrog Curation. And this is basically their way to basically give more emphasis on that security element regarding dependencies. So this is a shift left sort of focus here. Shift left meaning bringing the tools, processes, etc., closer to the developer on the left side of that stack or pipeline. And so this obviously speaks to DevSecOps in a big way here. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I thought I'd just mention it as something for you to check out. So that's, again, jfrog.com, and that's their new announcement for JFrog Curation. I love the GitHub CLI. I think it's pretty awesome. If you haven't had a chance to play with it, you should definitely check it out. It's available up at cli.github.com. If I can bring it up here. Not that, sorry. I don't know why that was in my search list. So if you go to cli.github.com, this is their landing page for the CLI. This is another way to navigate GitHub. So it is basically, I like command line interfaces because they get everything out of the way. Like, just get out of the way, UI. I just want the text. And so this has been around for a while, and the CLI is great. It provides a lot of great capabilities. And has got some great facilities for you to use if you're so inclined. The reason why I mention this is because they've recently added the project command, which is now part of the CLI. So the project command allows you to basically utilize projects as part of the CLI experience going forward, which is fantastic. And so for those of you who are used to using projects, you'll know that, projects are sort of a cornerstone of GitHub. And so now you have a list of commands that you can execute as part of a list of subcommands relative to GitHub. So you can create, copy, list, view commands for projects as part of GitHub, which is fantastic. Obviously, you have to go through a little bit of a permissions check before this occurs. So there's a little bit of a song and dance that has to occur with GitHub relative to the back end. So you have to authenticate to GitHub first before issuing these commands. But once you're done, you can simply run these project commands. These are subcommands available off of the GitHub CLI, and you can list your projects, create projects, etc. Great for automation contexts and security. Automation scenarios where you want to spin these things up automatically as part of a workflow. It also allows you to navigate them really, really easily, and you can write obviously custom scripts as part of this. Because this tool was written similar to the CLI itself that we have for Octopus. We think of output formats as a core component. So JSON is something that you can emit simply by specifying -- format equals JSON. Will allow you to emit that if you wish, and get the JSON representation of the output for the commands that you execute. Then they show examples of a variety of ways in which you can use it. For example, here you're using it in the context of GitHub Actions. So this is a great way of actually utilizing this as part of that experience. So I'm really excited about this. I love the fact that GitHub cares a lot about the CLI. I think the terminal is back, baby. I think the CLI is here to stay again. It's kind of like reminding me of a kid being in the 80s where we were all using command lines back in the day. But I think the TUI, the terminal UI, is back, and folks like Charm and others are doing a lot of great work around this. GitLab 16 introduced a concept that I almost missed. So GitLab 16 was shipped last month, I believe. I watched the webinar for this, and this was a feature that kind of flew under the radar for me. And when I saw this, like, whoa, wait a minute. So CICD Components is basically their name for a set of reusable parts and pieces that you can use in your GitLab workflows. So for those of you watching this and thinking, oh, this kind of sounds like GitHub Actions, you're on the right mark there. So CI/CD components are a reusable mechanism for GitLab workflows. And so this is a blog post that was recently posted to the GitLab blog. And they talk a little bit about what it is, why they built it, how it works, etc. And so Allows you to get reusability and abstraction. That's core tenets for GitHub Actions, for example. So reusability and abstraction. I don't like writing my own scripts. Look, vendor who knows product X really well and can provide an abstraction on top of that I just provide parameters to, do that for me, please and thank you. So it gives you that. And then I can reuse that as part of a workflow. Flexibility with input, so I can define various input and output parameters for various parts of my stages, which is super awesome. High quality standards through testing, that's a given. And then part of a CI/CD catalog. This sounds, and like if you think, hey, this sounds like the GitHub Marketplace, you might be correct. So I think this is GitLab's answer to GitHub Actions. And so CI/CD components are basically GitLab's, gotta get my terminology right, GitLab's answer to this. And so if you're at all curious at how this works and what it looks like, you can check out this blog post that talks a little bit about it. And I am super excited about this. I think this is awesome. And I think this is a feature that was a long time missing from GitLab. And I'm really happy that they've gone ahead and introduced this. Our folks, friends over at JetBrains have updated shipped a update to TeamCity. This is obviously their CI server. Again, bringing back the CI. So 2023.05.1 has shipped. This is mostly a bug fix release and provides a whole bunch of issue resolutions to the TeamCity product. So if you're all curious at revving your instance of TeamCity and you're at all wondering like what's new, this is basically a high-level summary of what's available there. So nothing major, but just to put it on your radar. This is an article that I saw, Top 20 Tools for DevOps by Emma. This is at Datamation, datamation.com. And I thought I'd just run through some of these. They're kind of fun to kind of like just see what people think relative to this. So she provides a listing of the types of DevOps tools that exist. Obviously, it's people, processes, and tools, but I like to focus on tools. So there's lots of tools available for you to use, and obviously they range in a variety of different ways. And so some of the ones that are highlighted here, Slack and Teams, I mean, those are the 1-2 punch there. If you're not using Slack and Teams today, chances are you're using email. So that's going to be like, email is like a cockroach technology. It will never die, right? So, but Slack and Teams is the way in which most people work today, this sort of IM culture. And so Slack and Teams, if your tool does not integrate with these, then you're going to be wondering like what's happening relative to your pipeline. So that's definitely something worth noting. Open DevOps, I'm surprised this one was listed. This is more of a marketing campaign by Atlassian. But Open DevOps is essentially a variety of things relative to Jira, which is basically the cornerstone of their DevOps ploy or plan or play, depending on your terminology. So Open DevOps defines protocols for integration with Jira and also provides a series of tools that integrate with Jira, including Octopus, by the way. We are on that list. Jenkins, enough said. The sort of the canonical CI platform that a lot of folks use. Monday, we use Monday ourselves. Great tool for planning. If you're wanting to do tasks and jobs, etc., that's a great tool. Trello also falls in that camp. Azure DevOps, great environment for CI and other types of things that you want to do relative to source code, for example. It's got version control. It's got CI processes. It's got all kinds of things to it. Chef, Ansible, Puppet, they all kind of fall into that camp around configuration management. I would even throw Terraform in there. I don't know if it's in this list or not. I'm surprised it's not, but Terraform would be up there for me. JMeter, Cucumber for BDD-driven development, and then a variety of other ones as well. So these are some of the ones listed. I am shocked that Octopus wasn't mentioned. I like to think of this as the best deployment tool, but there you go. And if you're looking for a more elaborate list of tools that you could use, you could always check out the landscape from the CNCF, the cloud native landscape, which is at landscape.cncf.io. I'm surprised how many people don't know about this. Kelsey Hightower has tweeted about this, and it's like, all you have to do is just pick one of 200 sort of products that are listed there. Octopus is listed. We're under the continuous integration and delivery category. But this is a summary of projects, vendors, etc., sponsors, etc., of the CNCF that are part of the landscape here, and it's like enormous. This landscape. So there's lots of tools available for you to do all kinds of different things relative to your projects. And so if you're at all curious, you can go check this out. This is at landscape.cncf.io. Lots of stuff listed there. And just to wrap things up, I just wanted to mention, this was a blog post that I caught my attention. This is from Garrett. His last name, Frankie, I believe. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. And this is a new blog series that he started called The Principles of DevOps. So we start off with an introduction. I think most of us know what DevOps is. But this one, which is interesting, is the concept of flow. And I like to think of flow as like sort of the way in which you operate as a developer, relative to your tooling. GitHub flow is a term that I've always viewed as synonymous with, applying DevOps practices. And so Garrett talks about it here being flow referring to the performance of a system as opposed to the performance of a specific silo or department. That is true. So flow is typically what I think of is when I'm a developer and I'm coding, everything is just happening as part of the process. I've gone ahead and defined my workflows. I'm utilizing a CI tool. I'm utilizing a CD tool. I'm monitoring and maintaining metrics relative to my deployments, and then cycling back feedback into issues, and then issuing new builds as part of branches that I create in Git, for example. And so when I think of flow, I think of like workflow and the way in which I operate relative to that. Garrett's observation here is that flow of work should always go in one direction, should be unidirectional. And I would agree with that largely. The only exception to that rule is when you're actually utilizing things to cycle information back. There are times and there are certain cases where you actually want it to be bidirectional. There are some cases where, for example, monitoring is a classic example of, where does that apply? Does it apply only to deployed artifacts, or could it apply to other aspects of your pipeline? For example, like if I'm utilizing a CI tool and the unit tests fail, where does monitoring fall into that? I'm not deploying anything, but it failed. So who do I notify? So I think when it comes to flow, I think that you should definitely consider all aspects of it. But I like the direction that Garrett's taking with this series of blog posts. And so I thought I'd just mention it there, and definitely something I will be tracking into the future. Anyways, that brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Deploy on Friday. Jim is obviously away. He sends his regards, but thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your time and attention, and we will catch you next week here on Deploy on Friday as always. So take care.